now you start getting into the deep work of the Lemurian/Atlantean part. And your story is going to come in too, because you were regressed back into a very pertinent life in Atlantis to what she was witnessing.
Right.
Right? So let's start with Lemuria, because it's kind of crazy considering who she was.
It was so fascinating for the both of us because we didn't know that much about Lemuria or Atlantis. So all of a sudden she was regressed to find out that she was a princess in Lemuria, and it was actually called Amun by the people there. But she grew up as a princess. Her mother was the queen, the ruler, and she was destined to become queen after her mother. And then visitors started showing up. And
yes, and that gets into the Atlantean part. You know what I want to do? I'm going to ask you if we can do this. The part prior to that, when she first came to Earth, she was not from here.
Right.
That I found really fascinating. It was just
so
Clan of the
fascinating
Cave Bearish.
because so in our first regression, her higher self, her subconscious, said that she needed to find out all this information to share it with the world, because it was so important for us as a human collective to find out this information. We need it desperately. So I wanted to start from the beginning when we decided to work together. So I told her subconscious, let's start from the beginning of the story that you want to start. Tell. Yeah. And we both thought she was going to go to her childhood in Lemuria, but instead she went to a different lifetime as an extraterrestrial coming to Earth for the very first time. And that is where the story begins.
And it was interesting because the people here were not as highly developed at the time and were living in tribal, primitive kinds of patterns, right? And she was a he, head of the crew, and the crew was stranded here, right?
Right.
Lost their mojo, lost all desire to really live, couldn't see how they were going to get anything done in the new environment. But he continued on and actually connected with the locals, and tell the story from there.
Sure. So they were stranded. Their ship crashed into the side of a mountain, and it was underneath the water as well. And they swam up. A few of them died. And when they escaped, they were cold and hungry, and they hadn't had that type of experience on their planet before. But they did know how to escape their ship because they had practiced that once before. But they had no knowledge that this would happen to them. And now, after looking back at it, she realized it was all planned that way. So eventually they met a human, and they begged for help, basically. And the human gave them food and shelter. And Jen, who was a commander in that lifetime, developed a relationship with her because he knew that the reason he was there was basically to further their experiment, to connect with the humans, to start a colonization. And once he connected with her, they eventually developed a relationship, and they ended up having one successful child.
I think she had like 5 births, and they all died except one. And he was banished by this time because the cultures were clearly quite different. And she went back with her own people, but did raise that one child. And it was challenging for the child, as I recall, because they were hybrid being, basically.
Right. That child was considered ugly.
Yeah.
But it was the start of so much. It was the start of that hybridization process.
Yes, and so that was her piece of this story of the beginning. And one thing that I note there that's interesting is she said that she understood that the crash itself, all of this, was intended. Now, the 20th anniversary of the disclosure event on UFOs took place relatively recently, and in that, one of the subjects that keeps coming up in questions is, why do these crash? Could it be it's for intention? And so they're still debating that in that circle, and she knows nothing of this, but that's what she came up with, was that this was for intention.
Yeah, and there were so many crashes all over the world.
Yes.
Strategically.
Yes. Strategically, and there were a lot of hybridization that started at that time.
What I found really fascinating was what was going on in Antarctica, because I had so many other clients regress to Antarctica where they started this colonization, and they started growing things like humans and plants and stuff, and they had to abandon their post there because disease snuck in.
This is
And-
going to come up again in the conversation. Yeah,
Okay.
the disease part. And also, if you look at the Piri Reis map, and everybody pretty much knows that Antarctica used to be verdant green. It was hospitable once upon a
Right.
time, just not now.
Right.
So yes, you're getting these stories, and there are other stories that start coming in from other people that don't know anything, that are giving pixels of their experience in the same place. And for me, that's what I like, is to start seeing people having similar remembrances. Then those are little vector points we start paying attention to.